The restaurant was too fancy, the conversation too forced, and Emma Chen was already rehearsing her polite exit speech when a little girl with ribbons in her hair crashed into their table. "Daddy!" The child couldn't have been more than 5, her face flushed with excitement as she tugged on the sleeve of Emma's blind date, a man she'd known for all of 40 uncomfortable minutes. "Daddy, it's her! It's the library lady from your story." Emma froze, her purse halfway to her shoulder. The man across from her, James Hartford, according to the dating app, had gone completely pale. The little girl was bouncing on her toes now, her eyes locked on Emma, with the kind of wonder usually reserved for princesses and superheroes. "Lily, sweetheart, I told you to wait with Grandma at the other table," James said, his voice tight with something Emma couldn't quite identify. Embarrassment? Fear? His hand shook slightly as he reached for his water glass. "But, Daddy, you said the library lady saved your life when you were sad. You said she gave you the book that changed everything." The child turned to Emma, her smile gap-toothed and radiant. "He talks about you all the time. He says you're an angel who didn't even know she was being an angel." Emma's mind raced backward, tumbling through memories like pages in a book. A library. 2 years ago, she'd been working her second job as an evening librarian, barely making rent on her studio apartment, drowning in her mother's medical bills. There had been so many faces, so many people passing through those fluorescent-lit aisles. "I don't understand," Emma whispered. But even as she spoke, something was shifting in her memory. A man, late evening. He'd been sitting alone in the self-help section, and there had been something about his posture, the way his shoulders curved inward like he was trying to disappear, that had made her heart ache. "You probably don't remember," James said quietly, finally meeting her eyes. "Why would you? It was just another night for you. But for me," he paused, his jaw working. "For me, it was the night I decided not to drive off the bridge on my way home." The restaurant noise faded to a dull hum. Emma's throat tightened. "My wife had just died," James continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Cancer. 6 months of watching her fade away, and then she was gone. Lily was only 3. I was drowning in grief and debt. The medical bills had destroyed everything we'd built. I couldn't see a way forward. I went to the library that night because I couldn't go home and face my daughter's bedroom. Couldn't look at the empty chair at our dinner table." Emma remembered now. The hollow-eyed man who'd been staring at the same shelf for 30 minutes. She'd approached him because the library was closing, but when she'd gotten closer, she'd seen the tears streaming silently down his face. "You sat down next to me," James said, and now his own eyes were glistening. "You didn't ask what was wrong. You didn't offer some cheap platitude. You just said, 'Sometimes the heaviest thing we carry is what we're holding inside.' And then you handed me a book, Man's Search for Meaning," Emma breathed. "By Viktor Frankl. You said your mother had read it during her own dark time, and it had helped her find purpose in suffering. You said sometimes we don't survive for ourselves, we survive for the people who need us, and that's enough. That's more than enough." The little girl, Lily, had climbed into her father's lap now, sensing the weight of the moment. "Daddy says that book taught him how to be sad and strong at the same time. He says you gave him permission to cry and fight on the same day." Emma's vision blurred. She'd given him that book from her own bag, a worn copy that had belonged to her mother. Her mother, who'd fought through depression after Emma's father left, who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat, who'd taught Emma that kindness wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up in small moments with an open heart. "I sat in my car that night and read until sunrise," James said. "And then I went home and held my daughter and cried for the first time since the funeral. Really cried. And then I started building a life again. I sold my mother's ring to pay off the worst of the debt. I worked nights as a janitor while building a business plan during the day. I learned to cook Lily's favorite meals. I learned to braid hair from YouTube videos. I learned that my wife would have wanted me to live, not just exist." "You built Hartford Tech," Emma said suddenly, the pieces clicking together. She'd seen the news articles. The janitor-turned-CEO who'd revolutionized accessibility software, who'd built a company worth millions while raising his daughter alone. James nodded. "I built it thinking about that library, about how information should be free, about how one person's kindness can ripple outward in ways they never see. Every product we make is designed to help people who are struggling, who feel invisible. Because someone made me feel seen when I needed it most. Emma was crying now, not bothering to wipe the tears away. I was going to quit that job the next week. The pay was terrible, and my mom needed surgery we couldn't afford. I felt like such a failure. Did you quit? No, a patron. I never knew who left an envelope at the desk with $5,000 and a note that said, "For the librarian who gives away her books." It was enough for my mom's surgery. Enough to keep me going. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. That was you? You gave me your mother's book. I couldn't let you leave that job. I couldn't let other people miss out on the chance to meet you in their darkest moment. James reached across the table, his hand open, an offering. I didn't know your name. I just knew you had kind eyes and that you'd save my life. When my assistant set up this blind date and showed me your profile, I thought my heart would stop. Why didn't you tell me? Emma asked, her voice breaking. Because I was terrified. What if you didn't remember? What if I'd built you up in my mind into something you weren't? What if you thought I was crazy? I thought I could just have dinner, get to know you as a person. And maybe... He stopped, laughing shakily. Well, I didn't account for my daughter having other plans. Lily giggled, proud of herself. Daddy has your picture on his desk. The one from the library computer. You're smiling and helping a little boy reach a book. He says it reminds him that heroes don't wear capes. Emma looked at this man, this stranger who wasn't a stranger, and at his daughter, who was beaming like she'd just solved the world's greatest mystery. She thought about that night 2 years ago, about how she'd been so close to giving up, about how she'd had no idea that handing over a worn paperback would set off a chain reaction that would save a life, build a company, and somehow bring them both to this moment. I was leaving, Emma said, smiling through her tears. I was going to fake an emergency and disappear. I wouldn't have blamed you, James said. I've been boring you for 40 minutes with talk about quarterly projections. To be fair, you were nervous. I could tell. Terrified. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight and wonder of it all settling around them like snow. Miss Emma? Lily tugged on Emma's sleeve. Will you stay for dessert? They have chocolate cake, and Daddy says we should celebrate when good people find each other again. Emma looked at her purse, abandoned now on the floor. She looked at James, at the hope and fear warring in his expression. She thought about her mother, who'd always said that the measure of a life wasn't in the big moments, but in the small kindnesses that echoed forward into the future. I'd love to stay, Emma said, and watched as James's entire body seemed to exhale. Later, much later, after chocolate cake and stories about libraries and braided hair, after phone numbers were exchanged with trembling fingers and promises were made to meet again, Emma would think about the invisible threads that connect us all. How a moment of compassion could save a life. How a life saved could build an empire of empathy. How sometimes the universe conspires to bring people back together just to say, what you did mattered. You mattered. And in the quiet of her apartment that night, she'd pull out her mother's old bookmark, the one that had stayed in her wallet since her mother passed, and read the quote, "There through new eyes, we rise by lifting others." She almost left that blind date. Almost missed the miracle of recognition, almost walked away from the proof that kindness is never wasted, that small acts ripple outward in ways we can't imagine, and that sometimes the people we save end up being the ones who save us right back.